Look, I'm grateful you found this podcast, but if you're listening to this because you think you might belong here, then my advice would be to stop right away. Listening to the Half-Blood Hill Show will only burden you with knowledge and insight about the Riordan-verse that will make you more of a target. After all, as we've been told, once you know the truth, then it's only a matter of time before they sense it too, and they'll come for you. But perhaps you're already known to them, and in that case, you've come to the right place. Join me, your host, Jared Kyaw, as we dive deeply into the works of Rick Riordan, chapter by chapter, here on the Half-Blood Hill Show. So strap on your celestial bronze armor, sharpen your wit, and let the quest begin. Welcome everybody to episode 4 of the Half-Blood Hill Show. Today with me, as you can see, I have Jay. She is back again for another chapter breakdown. I hope you are enjoying the new video setup if you are watching on YouTube. Podcastle hates to work for me, so we're going to try it this way. And if you are watching on YouTube, please be sure to like and comment, as it really helps these videos grow and spread. And if you are listening on audio platforms, please be sure to give us a rating and a review, because that really helps us as well a lot. Now, with my plugging complete for the start of the episode, we're going to get into the summary of chapter 4, which is titled, My Mother Teaches Me Bullfighting. And this chapter is a very heavy action chapter. There is a lot of movement. We talked about it at the end of chapter 3, that things start moving at a rapid pace. And this is like a testament to that. So we start where the last chapter left off, which is they're all running into Gabe's Camaro, which will suffer a most untimely fate. And they are booking it towards what we know as Camp Half-Blood, trying to avoid the storm and this monster that Grover is saying is after them. There's a weird revelation that happens where Percy realizes that Grover and his mom know each other, and Percy, being very confused, is trying to ask questions, and nobody is giving him direct answers. Let's see. Percy talks. We learn that Grover is not a goat to his. Don't mistake him with that. We learn that he is a satyr that was tasked with protecting Percy, and that. Also, all of the things that Percy had been being gaslit about were true, specifically that Mrs. Dodds was real, and that the 3 old ladies he saw at the fruit stand were the Fates. Percy's confused, obviously, about why no one had ever told him any of this information before, and Sally claims that it was a little bit too dangerous for him to know, and that Sally is taking him to Camp Half-Blood to be safe from the creatures of the Greek world that are trying to attack him. Unfortunately, it's not just the monsters Percy has to be careful about, it is the elements, because Zeus, continuing to hate, causes the Camaro to explode in a bolt of lightning, and to the surprise of nobody, Grover is unconscious, unable to help anybody, as Percy and his mom are near the property line and in a very, very dangerous position. Sally being Mom of the Year, Mom of the Century, Mom of the Millennia, whoever, says, I'm going to try to slow down the Minotaur. Percy, you get across the line. But we learn that Sally is not allowed to go past the line into Camp Half-Blood. Percy, being Percy, however, refuses to leave her or Grover, and unfortunately will end up, quote unquote, losing his mom as his mom turns into golden dust. In a rage, Percy will fight the Minotaur and will be successful in defeating it, but will end up unconscious, and when he wakes, he ends up in camp and meets one of my favorite characters in the series for the first time, Annabeth Chase. So, for this episode, we're doing this kind of different. Instead of going page by page by page, we've grouped our thoughts into like categories, and we're going to break these down as we go, with our first category being just the overall what we learn about the Percy Jackson mythos and the Percy Jackson universe. So I think, Jay, that the first one is to you.
Yep. So we're going to talk about our guy Chiron and how he can manipulate myths And that's confirmed in this chapter, which would have been a great lesson to teach Percy. And we know that because of Grover talking about how they were just really hoping that Percy would just, like, not worry about the kindly one. Like, all good, no worries. So that is beyond frustrating and kind of goes into what you were going to say about Percy's PTSD.
Yeah, so we learn that Chiron manipulates the mist in order to make everyone at Yancey Academy believe that Miss Dodds never existed, that the kindly one that Percy fought was a hallucination, and literally, I mentioned this in chapter 2, Percy is waking up consistently in a cold sweat because he cannot get this, like, fight that he just had with Mrs. Dodds out of his head, and, like, no one is validating that this actually happened. And so, like, this is, you know, just Chiron doing Chiron things. Like, I'm gonna take this solution because I think that this is best. Why? We don't know. But, like, I guess I don't know. I can't even come up with the devil's advocate information because, like, at this point, like, the kindly ones are Hades' torturers. They're, like, his direct servants. And so it's gotten to the level that Hades is getting directly involved in trying to kill Percy. And Chiron's still like, well, maybe everything can work out without him. And I asked it earlier and I'm like, how? At this point, he needs to be brought into the loop. Things are getting very serious. And, like, continuing on that trend of it getting very serious, this chapter is literally the first chapter where Percy is attacked by 2 of the big 3. Like, Hades is the person who sends the Minotaur after him. Hades is releasing these monsters from the underworld to go after Percy for the reason we haven't learned yet, but it's actually pretty funny because both Hades and Zeus have similar motivations for wanting Percy dead. And we know that Zeus obviously causes the car to blow up with a lightning bolt. So, you know, why it is that action steps were not taken before it got to this point, I'm not quite sure. At some point, you feel like Chiron would have just clip-clopped up the apartment to go see Sally and just be like, "Listen, Sally, like the king of the dead is after him. We gotta take him to camp. I know you love him. I know you want to keep him here, but, like, this isn't.
He's gotta go.
These aren't just, like, monsters or cyclopes coming after him. Like, the big guns are after him now, and he needs to go. You do not have the facilities to take care of this child anymore." And so, unfortunately, when the car does blow up, they are so close to the property line, but there is such a big roadblock in front of them.
So before we get into that, let's talk about the property line for just a second. What, first of all, like, the lack of specifics around this property line and who's in the know and who's not in the know is another very big question mark for me, because we do know, because Percy's mom yells to Percy, "You have to run. Do you see that big tree?" which is our foreshadow for Thalia. How does she know that? How does she know where the property line is? How does she know about the big tree? Has she been there before? Did Poseidon bring her? Did Chiron bring her? Like, there's so many questions as to where Sally is getting her knowledge and how that comes about right here. And how has she not met Grover at this point? That just continually is a big question for me. See, they know about each other, but they've never met. And then she can't cross, but she knows where it is. And all because we know that this is not like a visible line, right?
Yeah, it's just once you go over the hills, what looks like it's strawberry fields in the distance actually becomes Camp Half-Blood. So, like, if it was, I think if a mortal tried to cross it, it would either just, like, let them through and into the strawberry fields, or it would just, like, block them from being able to actually access the camp. Like, you know how like Hogwarts is supposed to have like some kind of charm on it, like so that like
Yeah.
the Muggles don't see it. I think it's a similar
Yeah.
concept for this property line.
So arguably, maybe I'm wrong. Arguably, she could look at that property line and see the beginning of a strawberry field.
Well, I don't know because Sally is clear-sighted, so meaning that like the mist doesn't affect her, or like she's able to identify the minotaur, right? Like to her, it's not just some giant bull running after them, like the mist might make you believe. Like she can see the minotaur for what it is. So you know, it comes in much later in the series where we meet a character named Rachel who is also clear-sighted. And what's weird is that Rachel can enter the property line. So what I think has to happen for a clear-sighted mortal to be able to enter the property line is they have to be given explicit permission from Chiron. Like, you can see it, so you know it exists, but you can't go through it. So, like, I think in Last Olympian, now that I'm, like, really festering on it, I think Rachel says that she has some business to do in Camp Half-Blood. Like, there's something she needs to do. And Chiron gives her permission to be able to fly across the property line on Percy's Pegasus that she steals. But if it is the case that it needs to be permission granted from Chiron, this is just another horrible thing for.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Yeah.
Like, so many conversations could have been had preemptively, especially knowing that these three characters, Sally, Grover, and Chiron, like, kind of know each other and have somehow been in the same vicinity. Especially, like, Chiron has the least excuse because he was also Percy's teacher. Like, one phone call home and then, like, okay, a little bit of trauma is going on here. And don't get me wrong, I like my heroes with a little bit of trauma, but this is getting to a dangerous point. So I need you to know where this place is. Like, you know, and just a little bit would have gone a long way for me.
So actually, I'm writing a video right now for my channel. It's like the title is like Why I Love Sally Jackson. And so in it, I theorize that like, it's not that Sally doesn't know, like, you know, the property line or it's like specifics. Like, I think that in that summer that she spends with Poseidon, I think that Poseidon is actually very clear with Sally in terms of like, okay, Percy is not supposed to exist. Like, this was an error. He does say, even to Percy's face later, that he was a mistake. He wasn't supposed to happen. Which is rough, but it is in there. And so, like, I think that when he realizes what's going to happen, I think he is very clear with Sally in being like, this is where the property line is. This is Camp Half-Blood. You need to send Percy here as soon as possible. And I think, like, in my understanding of, like, what Poseidon wanted, I think he would have wanted Percy there earlier than even Annabeth gets there. Like, I think he wants Percy to be there, like, from his childhood all the way until he is 16, training under Chiron directly. That's what I think he wants. And I actually think that it is Sally's love for Percy that kind of derails this plan. Like, that she cannot, like, detach herself from her kid, and that she wants to keep Percy close to her, and that is why she will go through the troubles of, like, marrying Gabe, hiding him with the scent, keeping in like rough contact with like satyr protectors. But I do think that, like, I think had Percy gone across the line, he would have remained unclaimed for a very long time. But I think that Chiron would have known eventually that Percy was Poseidon's kid and then started training him until Percy will eventually be claimed in the manner that he is when it is time to finally help his father and he's more prepared for it. But that's kind of like just a theory I have where it's like, I feel like there is a lot more that happens in those couple months that he and Sally are together on Montauk than even Sally lets on. That's kind of just something that I mean, it has to happen. How else would she know? Like, she had to have been given direct information by her her immortal partner.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And how far have you gotten in the show?
So I'm assuming you're talking about like the scene at the cafe where they're talking to each other. Yeah, I've seen it. If that happens, like if we think that is actually happening behind the scenes and there's more communication there going on, then maybe. But like, I genuinely think that Poseidon was a very hands off, just from the jump. And actually, I also wonder how much of Poseidon not being involved in Percy's life actually comes as a result of what he knows about Thalia and Luke, in which Hermes and Zeus tried to be more involved in those two's lives and how that worked out for them. Like, I think that maybe he's even seeing it as cautionary, where Beryl Grace, Thalia's mom, goes insane because she learns that Zeus, like, that she is the mother of 2 kids from the king of the gods, and that, like, she should be entitled to everything in the world, and like she cannot stay grounded. And then May, who will just absolutely lose her mind due to the fact that Hermes acknowledges the fact that she has like minor prophetic abilities, and she wants to go and become the oracle when it's not her place to become the next oracle. And that drives her insane, and she sees all the future stuff that's going to happen to Luke. And so I think there was a lot of times where like Poseidon may have wanted to be there, but like saw these 2 cautionary cases and said, I can't. Like, I just cannot interfere at all.
Did you buy the twist that the show did on the specific moment of why Poseidon is so hands off? Because in the show, it makes it seem as though he agrees with Sally's perspective of like not wanting Percy to grow up in the mentality of the gods.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're keeping him away. Like, I feel like that is not quite.
Well, I mean, I think that Percy even tells Poseidon at some point that he, like, when he rejects immortality, part of it is that he doesn't want to end up a part of this like mess of a family.
Right.
And I think that, you know, Poseidon respects it. I don't I mean, of the big 3, well, actually I can't even say that. I think of the big 3, Hades is probably the most loving and caring parent of all of them. But like, Poseidon's not wholly objective all the time. Like, he's not like, this is the mission, this is what you got to do, X, Y, and Z. But I think that because I'm like 99% sure all the gods know the prophecy of the like that's happening. And so like, I think that when he realizes that his child, no, actually, I might be wrong here, because Thalia is alive before Percy. So why would he think that Percy would be the child of the prophecy? He would have thought it was probably Thalia. I don't know. I actually, in that case, I actually don't know. I would imagine that, like, he would know that, he would know at least in bare minimum that it's like, because he is my kid, he is going to attract more monsters and more danger than the majority of gods. So you should get him to Camp Half-Blood ASAP. But in terms of like, you know, his desire to keep Percy away from the immortal world and like make sure he was, I don't think he cared that much yet.
I agree. Anyway, side quest there.
Yeah.
Back to the main quest.
All right, back to the main quest.
So the next point that we were going to talk about is Percy's power buff. And we were talking about the 2 items that we think he gets the power buff from. Firstly, we know for sure he gets power buffs from water, any kind of water, and that gives him extra strength, etc. But there's this one quote where he said, "The rage filled me like high-octane fuel." So it is also seemingly implied that his powers are also fueled by his emotions, and that delicate balance between the 2 makes me wonder, is it emotion driven in his youth, and maybe as he grows and matures in his strength, he actually knows where he can more safely draw power? Or is it both? Either way.
So I have a couple thoughts about this. Number one is that, do you remember that scene from Avatar: The Last Airbender where Katara meets the Bloodbender and she just bends the water out of the air?
Yes.
Right? So I'm thinking to myself, like, Percy once again is not like utilizing his power set to the best of his ability, because he could be doing that to everything.
True.
Like, he could be touching
100%.
trees, draining the moisture out of trees, and using that
his own moisture
as like a temporary buff or something. Or like, my other thought is that maybe he is subconsciously doing that and walking around with like an always buff on whenever he's just in air, and that's why he's stronger than other like demigods just like in base. I don't know, but I guess it's not an anime, so like maybe they're not thinking about it like that.
Good reference though. 10 points for that reference.
It in general, I do think that, so Percy describes the water, like his ability to control water, as like this like feeling in the pit of his stomach that like allows him to control it. But it's like, so when he fights the Ares kids, that's one show of his major power when he's buffed in the water. When he fights the Minotaur, obviously, is a show of his major power. Another thing is that much later, I think it's in chapter 15, 16 or whatever, where they go and try to retrieve Ares' shield. He causes the pipes in this like abandoned amusement park to explode and flood the boat ride with water so you can get out of a situation. But I think as a kid, it's very much like he plans it out. He wants to do it, but he cannot do it until he becomes so stressed out that his emotions force him into doing it. Like in the part with the boat, he is desperately trying to save himself and Annabeth from these like metallic spiders that are coming after them. And so like Annabeth, because there are spiders there, is like, cannot help, cannot think. It's just her biggest phobia are these spiders. And so he's like desperately trying to escape the situation. Nothing is working. And then finally, you know, he gets so emotionally heightened that the water comes out. When he's about to get his like head swirled by Clarice, it's not until like he's just like, nope, I am not going to do that. I'm not going in there. You cannot make me. And then the pipe blows up. But I think that it's like, I mean, obviously, eventually, as he gets older, it's almost at will that he's able to do a lot of these things. But right now, he is, once again, untrained, and nobody is helping this kid. Nobody is teaching him how to do any of this. Granted,
poor child.
It's not entirely on Chiron. Chiron cannot teach Percy how to water bend. He doesn't have that. He does not have that skill set. But I'm like, walk him through it, maybe ask him some questions. Like, how do you feel when you do this? Do you notice anything when you do this? Like, whatever.
We'll talk about how a little guidance goes a long way, but right now we're gonna pivot into some character work. Go ahead, take it away.
All right, so for character work, the first thing that we get to see is this like, for a chapter that's very stressful for most of the time, it is kind of cute to see the like the fact that they're just kids, you know, like really emphasizing like Percy and Grover's like conversation in the back seat. They're just children, and like, God, that's such a childlike conversation. Wait, you know my mom? How do you know my mom? You have goat legs. What's going on with the goat legs? Like,
like, I promise I'm your friend, Percy. I promise.
That one killed me, where he was just like, yeah, I know I was lying to you about all the Greek myths, but I wasn't lying to you about being your friend. And like, I was like, oh, like he's so concerned about it. It's like, it's actually so he doesn't
so
want
much.
Percy to think that he was playing him. honestly, Grover can't play anyone ever. Like, his lying,
No.
his poker face is horrific. But
Not
just
good.
in general, it was just a really cute conversation. But like, their friendship is really beautiful. But his protector abilities are trash. Like,
Fail.
they are not good. And
Critical fail.
I know that Riordan does this because, like, the goal is to show just how incompetent of a protector Grover is, and then watch him grow into a very competent satyr and searcher. But, my God, can we give him some, like, less challenging assignments? Maybe have him escort a child of Hermes, or maybe have him escort a child of Demeter, or
Anybody.
someone that is not going to attract the biggest, baddest monsters to their kid. Like, please give him a break.
I feel like we have learned, and this is just doubling down on the ultimate failure of training. Like, Percy got no training, Grover has no training. Like, it is solely trial by fire, excessive trauma. That's the recipe for
I
a
say
good hero.
Grover has more of an excuse, okay? Because Chiron's job is official. Like, his official job is trainer of demigods. That is why he is allowed to live forever. Like, that is what he asks for as a wish, is to be a trainer of demigods for as long as the world needs them. In fairness to Grover, Grover's trainers are the Council of Cloven Elders, all of whom hate him because he's young and has, like, aspirations of greatness, and they're all old and crotchety and failures. And the other person is Dionysus, who, to his own admission, does not want to be there. Like, is punished by being at Camp Half-Blood. So it's like, I get that he sucks, but, like, can we please stop putting Grover to start at level 10? Maybe level 1. Maybe level 5. Something that he can achievably do. Because, like, I'm sure if he just had to escort Annabeth and Luke to camp, he would have been much more successful than if he had to gather. Whose idea was it to look at the young, unproven satyr and say, boy, do we have a job for you? So there's this child of Zeus, you know, the one that's forbidden. We were thinking, you want to walk her all the way up here from San Francisco to New York? Like, you wanna do that trip? Just terrible. I feel so bad for Grover, but at the same time, at this point, with Grover being unconscious, with Percy having to be the one that actually protects him, with his failure in protecting Thalia, like, you cannot blame the Council of Cloven Elders for just kind of determining, hey, buddy, you may not be built for this searcher life after all. Like, you may not have it in you.
Justifiably. Especially, I think that's a great gateway into talking about Percy's fatal flaw, because we have Grover snoozing and dreaming about food, or demanding it, rather, because I think there are some exclamation points like, food, give me food. And this is right after Percy sees Sally die, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And he says, I wanted to lay down and cry, but there was Grover needing my help. So we've already established, I think in 2 chapters, that Percy's fatal flaw is excessive personal loyalty. We know that. And he's willing to put aside his own, like, a crazy level of grief for, like, the one person in this world that means, honestly, anything to him other than Grover at this point. Dying in front of him. I'm going to put air quotes around dying. And he puts that all to the side to save Grover's passed out little goat hooves. Like, it's depressing.
He's just so not ready.
No. Bad, especially because Grover is not like Like, this 12-year-old little boy has to save this 20-something-year-old satyr, who I know looks younger, but still, hooves have to be heavy. Like, I just can't believe
He's not hollow boned.
that Grover is light. It's like, no way. So, going back to the point about Sally, right? We see her supposed death after she's picked up by the Minotaur, and she glows in this, like, golden light, and she's gone. She disappears into these, like, little flecks of light. And the last thing that Sally says is go. And I think, we talked about this in the failed recording, of how with a mother and son relationship, there's almost like this societal expectation that the last thing you might want to say is "I love you." Mm-hmm. But Sally, as a person and as a mom, like, Percy knows that she loves him. So what she says instead is "go," which I feel like is equivalent to survive, save yourself, do whatever you need to do, like, go to the property line, go. I think that is huge, and it speaks to a lot of their dynamic, but I think it also speaks to the origin of Percy's fatal flaw.
I also
having
hit
it
on that. It just popped into my head here, right? Is that, like, when this is happening, when she is being, like, strangled, and we know, what, like, turning into golden dust, I think in that moment, she knows her son so much that she knows that there is going to be a part of Percy that feels like it's his responsibility to protect her. And, like, instead of, like, feeding into that, like, she is telling him, like, with this fight, like, do not listen to that urge that you feel to stay behind and protect me. Like, I know that is how you feel. You need to go. You need to run. And like that, I don't know, like, it really just does show how much Sally knows her son.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, like, I guess she's not, like, a hero in the sense of, like, the way that this book works, but I wonder if they actually have the same fatal flaw.
I think she is. And that's what I was going to say by the origin of the fatal flaw. Like, we are so much of our parents, good and bad. Like, Sally's selflessness, I think, combines with that excessive personal loyalty. Like, it's the same to me. So I agree with you.
Which might also feed into the reason why she cannot leave Percy at Camp Half-Blood, why she can't just dump him off and be like, okay, goodbye. Like, she feels a mother's obligation, but also, like, probably to an extent, like, this personal loyalty to her. Like, even the fact that we learned that her uncle was abusive to her, and yet she dropped out of school to go take care of her. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to characterize these, like, moments of kindness as, like, a fatal flaw, but, like, in a way, it's like, that's a lot of loyalty you have to someone who treated you this poorly. Like, it's a tough one.
Was it in the failed recording, or was this a side conversation when we were talking about how fatal flaws in all reality are too much of a good thing?
That was in this recording. Yeah, it was in the last recording where loyalty is good, but excessive loyalty is bad. Confidence is good, but excessive pride is a detriment.
Yep.
Feeling remorse is good, but being guilt-ridden is detrimental.
Self-destructive, for sure.
Setting boundaries is good, but holding grudges is detrimental to your, like, is detrimental. So yeah, I do. I think thank you for bringing that up. That was a really good connection we made last review.
Yeah.
So it'd suck if it just didn't make it in here.
Yeah. Okay.
But we do get introduced to one more character in this chapter, and that is Annabeth. And what a great character this character will turn out to be. Like, I remember, like, my sister reading this book, like my little sister reading this book for the first time, and just being like, it was so cool to see, like, the way that this child with, like, really not that much extraordinary power will still be able to impact the story in more ways, or equal to, or even in more ways than Percy can. And like the way that she will use what she has at her disposal to make waves when it comes to, you know, all of these. And God, there's just, I personally feel, I've read a lot of young adult fiction when I was a young adult and even now. I personally feel that young adult fiction a lot of times really struggles with creating healthy romances between their characters. And like, I just love the way that Annabeth and Percy's relationship will develop from the time they are 12 to the time they are 17 in the sequel series. And just that, like, they become such, like, it actually becomes a situation where, like, they both fall in love with their best friends. Instead of just, like, you're cute, let's be cute together. Like, they're very much, like, they very much learn to complement each other and be what the other person needs at the right time. And I think it's just overall very beautiful. And we get this super funny description, and it'll come up later, where I don't know why this always cracks me up. Percy sees her, thinks that she's a princess, thinks that she's like this very like cute, beautiful girl. And then the first words that will come out of Annabeth's mouth next chapter are like so dismissive of this entire idea, which is you drool when you sleep. Just such an aggressive, like opening line. Like, not at all what you think a princess would say in that moment. Just very much like, you're gross. And then
you're gross, and that's a little creepy. You know, for that to be said to me by somebody I've never met before, you drool in your sleep, and be like, what do you...
And yeah, of course Annabeth would struggle with social skills. She has been at camp since she was 7, and like... has suffered ungodly traumas that do not get addressed at all. Like, she saw who she came to see as like her older sister die in front of her to save her life. And that's just like, I know there's no mental health counselors at Camp Half-Blood. So like, of course she'd be a stunted little weirdo. If they did, they'd be
horrible. Like,
she would be a stunted little weirdo who just like, has a very unhealthy attraction to this 17-year-old boy who will emotionally manipulate her multiple times. Like, her social skills would be atrocious. But the thing that sticks out to me, aside from Annabeth, is that Chiron is there, like, watching over Percy and, like, Annabeth and all these people that have come to, like, being like, oh my god, he killed the Minotaur. And I'm like, Chiron, I swear to God, if I learn that while Percy was fighting for his life against the Minotaur, you were playing Pinochle with Dionysus, I'm turning over to the Titans. Like, I'm not doing it. You were right there.
Yeah.
Nothing. And I brought it up in the failed recording last time, but what you would think, even with the line, I get it, right? You have the property line, you feel safe, right? But you would think that after Thalia dies the way she dies, there would be a chore, something like assigned to one of the campers at Camp Half-Blood, which is watch the property line for incoming demigods that might be getting attacked by monsters. Like, you would, like, so that we can assemble our campers to go bring that kid in. No, apparently not. They didn't learn from losing one of the big three's children, and they're about to lose the second one. Like, this camp refuses to learn. That's what I'm understanding.
Well, I'm gonna bring up the same point that I did in the failed recording, and you know, there's always you gotta make it a story somehow. But I'm wondering, with these habits that I see and the lack of, honestly, Chiron is like the peak principal of any public school. Like, let's just say that real quick. His not doing anything is almost an art form. But also, I wonder, like, I feel like they want their heroes to come in with a dash of trauma. Like, they got to be spicy with that failure, or just, you know, going against the test before they come on in, because they have to have some pain in order to reach like a genuine success. You know what I mean? Like, the scales have to be in both sides. So I feel like that hands-off perspective is really because they're like, well, I don't want to break you down. So you're going to face the Minotaur right outside of camp, and then if you win, because it's nothing to me if you lose, but if you, because he, you know, whatever, prophecy, whether he's confirmed that himself or not, I'm going to let you handle that, and then when you come in, because you've done that, then it's going to be so much easier to not train you as I delegate to the other people inside. All your other teachers who are 17 or less.
Now I just imagine Chiron at the property line, invisible to Percy, with like a bag of popcorn, just being like,
honestly,
and
a little,
then just being like,
little clipboard.
He's just there like, I wonder why he's not pulling out his sword. Oh wait, I have his sword. He doesn't even have his sword with him. Just like,
you know what? I'm using his sword to decide who I'm going to delegate these tasks to.
It's like,
in order to train the kid. I see it.
Kid has no celestial bronze on him at all. Let's see how he does.
Nope. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. Just like I didn't help Sally, and I also didn't help Grover. You know, why change a good thing?
He took down Mrs. Dodds. He's about it. He's good. Like,
he's fine. Yes.
Just
terrible. Okay.
All right, so our last topic, our last like section for us is connections to the original myths, and also like a little bit of the ways they were changed. So obviously, the Minotaur is from Greek mythology. He's actually connected, I believe, to the myth of the labyrinth. And needing to get to the center of the labyrinth to kill the Minotaur is the only way to escape off this prison that the king is forcing all of these people to go to, because the king has a son, and then the son gets cursed into being the Minotaur, and then like out of rage, he just keeps sacrificing people to the Minotaur. I'll talk more about the myth in general, but Riordan does this great thing where he takes something that is like innately very interesting, which is Greco-Roman mythology. And then part of the appeal of the Percy Jackson series is the way that he will adapt those myths into modern day. And so obviously no one's walking around with a loincloth anymore, but instead the Minotaur is wearing Fruit of the Loom tighty-whities. And I wish there was more of that in the show. This absolutely like it is unhinged. That's the word. Where I'm like, this man is writing like a maniac. It does not make sense that this, but he's just like, I could just imagine him like looking at a photo of the Minotaur, just being like, okay, now how do I make this more modern? And then he's just like, he's changing the next day. He's looking in his underwear drawer and he's like, I got it. I'm gonna make him wear tighty-whities. Like, I just love it. He'll do it so many times. Yeah. And I think like 9 out of 10 times they hit. Like, there's a few where I'm like, but like most of the time the way he'll modernize a myth is just fantastic. But I saw that you noted something weird when it comes to like these Greek mythological monsters.
And maybe I'm wrong. I do not have a degree in Greco-Roman mythology. I don't know. But it's giving Voldemort when Sally, of all people, Sally says, don't say the Minotaur's name. Names have power. And mind you, that is not inherently saying that the Minotaur would then like know where you're at and come at you directly. Like, it could be like a power boost carrying its own name. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like exactly Voldemort's jinx, but it did make me go, huh? I don't know if you know anything about that, but I was a little skeptical of that moment.
Yeah, also like, I don't know why, but I'm 90% sure by the time we hit Blood of Olympus, or not Blood of Olympus, but the Heroes of Olympus series, that this concept is dropped. Like, I don't I don't think it continues on with like the names have power thing, but I always
Mm-hmm.
did find it odd, and I think I talked to you about it earlier, where it's like names and like monsters. It always reminds me of like horror movies where like in is it The Conjuring? Conjuring 2 or whatever? It's one of the Conjurings where they're trying to look through the book of like demons to try to find out what it's Conjuring 2 because they're looking for Valak's name. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, we need the name, we need the name." And then God, what's her name? Um Lorraine Warren's character tries to banish
Yeah.
Valak out of the house. She has to say his name, and like knowing the name gives her power over the demon. So it's actually a
Mm-hmm.
weird little inverse here when it comes to like Greek mythology, where it's like you don't actually want to know its name because that will boost its power, which like also leads to the question of these things were ostensibly being taught by Chiron. So like how
Mm-hmm.
was he saying these names whenever he was teaching about them in the Greek myth, or does it not affect him because he's not a Greek hero?
Mm.
Or you
I'm
know what it
not
was?
sure.
You know what it was? It was probably
What?
it was probably every time Percy was about to say one of the names or ask a question, Grover does that horrific goat sound in the middle of class and just derailed the whole conversation.
Oh, it's the minute back.
Meanwhile,
like
Nancy
that.
over there, like half asleep, just trying to mindlessly take notes. We go, what the heck? What was that?
No wonder why she was picking on Grover. He made it easy.
Yeah, at this point, I'd also be picking on him. Stop making bleating noises in class. I don't have time for this.
In class, dude, I can't. Your comment in the failed recording about him making those noises in the middle of like a test or whatever. Like, imagine that. Like, I would genuinely not be able to keep myself together if someone was bawling in class, and seriously, like compulsively.
And it's like, at least Chiron knows. What is he doing in English class? Like, at least Chiron's aware of who Grover is. Like, they ask him to write something about...
Maybe he has an IEP.
Maybe he has an IEP. That's the only thing.
He takes that outside
Just,
in the other classes. Oh, no.
Chiron is the pull-out support teacher that has to come in.
You're going to go to small group now? We'll see you in 30 minutes. Okay. Main quest. Keep going.
Speaking of teachers, so it turns out that Percy's best teacher that he will ever seem to have when it comes to Greek mythology is Sally. Because Sally seems to have studied how to combat these monsters. I just imagine her, like, in her living room, or, like, in the living room. Like, you know how sports teams will watch tape on the enemies? Like, she's watching tape of the Minotaur and watching tape of, like, just taking down notes to be like, all right, if my son comes across it, how could I do it? At this point, Sally should just write an encyclopedia and give it to Percy, because that's the most help that he's ever gonna get. Because
a little guidebook would have gone a long way.
Because she knows a lot about the Minotaur, actually. Like, in all seriousness, like a surprising amount. She knows that his sight is bad. She knows that his hearing is terrible. She knows that he goes by smell. She knows that he can't make tight turns. And it's actually amazing what Percy will do with this information the second he is told about how to combat the Minotaur. You know, like, he starts banking tight turns, he starts hiding behind trees, he's like for a second, I mean, there's like 10 or 15 seconds that you're reading and you're like, Percy might got this. Like, Percy might actually have this now with this bit of information. And like, yeah, he wins, but like, he wins in a different way. But still, like, it was so useful. Just the smallest tip helped Percy out tremendously. But the thing that stuck out to me, and I'm sure it stuck out to you, was the mention that, like, he goes by smell. And, like, I have to assume that, like, all monsters, to an extent, of their five senses, their smell is the strongest. Like, scent seems to be something that's harped on consistently. And, like, It is the first hint, I believe. Not the first hint, but it is another hint before it is directly stated later as to why Sally was staying with Gabe all of these years. And that is that this smell that he has is, I think it's described as like he smelled so much like mortal that like no monster was able to see through it. And
does that come later?
I think it comes in the next chapter where Chiron is trying to comfort Percy, where he's just like, you're probably wondering why your mother spent all this time with Gabe. And I'm like, yeah, Chiron, he was wondering that. Probably for many years of his life. You coulda helped him out with that. You know, like, it's giving having to go back to number 4 Privet Drive every summer. Like, if you could just explain to the boy why he has to do this.
Why?
Like, it would just
Great parallel.
It would just help so much.
It's giving Master Gatekeeper.
Yeah.
That's what it's giving.
Cannot help at all.
For Pivot Drive. That's so funny.
But it does show, like, it genuinely does show that, like, Percy is actually very teachable. He's very coachable as, like, a person. Which is, I actually have found to be very rare in protagonists. Like, for some reason, I find that a lot of them are very stubborn or, like, unwilling to accept help. And Percy is very much like, do you have something that can help me? Does anyone here have an idea? Like he's always asking. He's like, anyone got anything for me? I got nothing. Like,
dude, the typical hero's ego is something, like, I feel like it's almost a trope. Sorry, I'm trying to not cuss. It's a huge trope that we find in so many, I think less so YA than adult fiction, fantasy, sci-fi even, is that the hero is always struggling with their own ego, but because of Percy's, trying not to cuss, trials and tribulations of his growing into adult life, he's like, all the info, just give it to me, please.
Like, he's just glad to have any information about the fight before he has to go there. He's like, help me out.
He
like,
did not have that struggle.
I don't know if you've ever read King Killer Chronicle, but, like, there's a character in it. The main character's name is Kavoth, and, like, I want to strangle this kid every time he's, like, every time, like, the story revolves around it, where he's just like, what should I do? What should I do? I gotta think of something. And I'm like, have you tried asking someone for help? And he's like, can't do that. I'm smarter than everyone. And I'm like, I hate you. I hate you so much.
Okay, wait, pause. Because we do have to go back to, what is it? Chapter 2, I think, when Percy has this, like, final revelation, when he's like, I'm going to do so good on my Latin test, and I'm going to study, and you know what? I should go ask Mr. Brunner for help. I'm just going to have this epiphany before my final exam. And then we have that, like, short conversation about how, especially Riordan, you, me, they never do. They never come and ask for help.
You know that this man has had student hours every day, like every week for the entire school year, and just not once did Percy ever show up.
Literally the purpose.
Although apparently he passes, because it does say, like, when Chiron and Percy are talking with each other about, like, random mythology stuff, he's just like, oh, Percy, I would hope that you would know this answer because you did pass my test. I'm like, shut up, Chiron. This kid has gone through some massive, like, trauma right now. He thinks his mom is dead. Forgive him if he doesn't remember what the answer was to question 17 on your
Not you did. You did pass my exam. Not just you passed. You did indeed. You did the one exam. Oh, that would
to the surprise of everyone, you passed.
Yeah, right. It gives that vibe.
But the last thing that I have here is I said I was going to talk about it earlier, but it is the myth of the Minotaur, and more interestingly, who is responsible for the death of the Minotaur. So
Okay.
In most mythology, you follow some sort of demigod or some like legacy in which like they were relatively related to a former demigod. That demigod lived,
Mhm.
had kids, whatever. But most of the time, it is Zeus, where he transforms into a bird, and then gets a woman pregnant against her will, and then that kid has a horrible life. That's typically the way of the Greek myth. Like there was Hercules and Jason and all of this stuff. But the story of the Minotaur is interesting because it follows the hero Theseus. And Theseus is, in most renditions of the myth, a child of Poseidon. And so the Minotaur is the monster that the child of Poseidon kills. And so he does that with his bare hands. He doesn't have a weapon, he does it with his bare hands.
Mhm.
And there's a weird thing that happens where I think that Jason, Hercules, and Theseus all live around the same time, according to the myth. They're all around the same age.
Mhm.
And Theseus and Hercules will actually wrestle multiple times and come to
Mhm.
draws. And so it also kind of parallels the fact that like Percy will also be continuously compared to Hercules
Mhm.
through Theseus, and like Theseus, like his half brother from thousands of years ago, he also, upon the revelation of learning about the fact that the Greek myth world exists, the
Mhm.
first monster he then encounters with that knowledge is the Minotaur, and like Theseus, he kills the Minotaur with his bare hands. And I thought that that was a very, cool parallel to just everything that happens in that fight.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Full circle.
Yep. Look at me making
Yes.
connections to the myth.
Love it.
Theseus then
Yes.
does abandon Ariadne on a beach and then leaves her there to be to death, and then Dionysus comes. So he's not a great person, but you know, we
I didn't say
grow.
that.
We grow in thousands of years. We evolve as people, hopefully, where we're like, maybe we shouldn't leave women alone on islands because they had the nerve to talk back to us. Maybe, like maybe we grow. Like
And this is why Rick makes it his own. He's like, I'm gonna take this part of this story, this good part. I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna put that in my story, but I'm gonna leave everything else out.
that one's not it. We're not gonna keep the part where Theseus says, "Hey, I promised to get you off the island, didn't I?" and then leaves her on another deserted island. It's just a tragedy.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah. But with that, that was chapter 4. My mother teaches me bullfighting, and overall, like a quick chapter. Honestly, like
Yes.
it was very fast paced. It was very. We don't get a lot of development. There is an issue here where in the whole drive, not once does Percy's mom say to him, also, when you get to camp, your father is like none of like she knows the fact
Good
that she
point.
like she never says
You're not
anything.
supposed to help Percy. That's it. You're not supposed to help.
But like, overall, I think that it was fun. I would call the chapter
Mhm.
fun. It's interesting. It gets a little sad at the end with Percy's mom dying, Sally dying, but like, come on. No, none of us believe that, even when we read it when we were 12. So
No.
I guess I appreciate it, because they didn't like Marvel MCU fake death us. Like I don't think we were ever supposed to
Mhm.
believe that Sally was actually dead.
Yes.
I think the best thing I can say about chapter 4 is that it gets me really excited to read chapter 5. And I think that that is the objective of a chapter like this, where it is a transition chapter into the next location. And I think that for its purpose, it did it really well. It was very fast paced. It doesn't seem to drag. Rick's stories are, rarely do you see pages and pages of text that are worthless. So, from a writer's perspective, I think this chapter was very technically sound. But I have to say, I'm very excited for next week. I play Pinochle with a horse because I know some of the events that happen there. I know some of the characters we get introduced there, and I'm really, really excited to talk about them. But do you have any final thoughts you wanted to add?
I wanted to tack on to your action chapter point because not only do we get this fast-paced experience, we also have some good nuggets of humor and love, like between Sally saying go and then the funny tidy whities bit and then Grover like groaning for food. Like amongst all of that action, you get these really good little nuggets, and I agree with what you were saying about from an author and a writer's perspective. Reading that is very masterful because those transitional chapters can be so boring, but he puts really good, very purposeful, like, I promise you're going to get there. Just a little bit.
Like you're
Enjoy
there.
this little bit. Yep. Oh, you're done now. Yeah, you had to get through this, and now you're there. And there were a couple things in there that make it worth it, and that's cool for me. I love that.
And so with that, you know, we are gonna hopefully try to get chapter 5 out to you on the normal time schedule. But until then, until next week, you know, please check out more of my content. I have all of my ats listed in the video, so please check them out. I'm writing more on Medium. I actually just posted a book review there for One by One. It was not good. But you know, if you're interested in reading that,
honesty for me.
go ahead and do that. Follow me on Twitter to boost my ego. Check out some of my writing on Wattpad. Eventually, I promise you, I will post stuff there, but follow ahead of time so that you can be the first people to see my work. And then, eventually, I swear to you, I promise to all of you, I will finish Hogwarts Legacy. I will do it. I'm going to be playing it on Twitch. So, follow me there. Watch me play it. Watch me be bad at video games. It'll be a lot of fun. We can talk about Harry Potter stuff in the live chat. So go ahead and do that. And Jay, anything you want to plug?
Same on you. I've almost beaten Legacy twice, Jared. Same.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Well, until next time, have a great rest of your day and peace.
Hey there, guys. Thank you all so much for watching episode 4 of the Half-Blood Hill Show. We know that the audio wasn't as strong as we'd like it to be in this episode, and we're working on ways to fix it for the next one. But if you made it to the end, we really appreciate it. If you haven't yet, please be sure to like the video and subscribe. And once you're done with that, I'd encourage you to take a look at some of my other content either here on YouTube or on Medium. It helps out a lot. And with that, have a great rest of your day, and until next time, peace.